ladies and gentlemen, with that, we move on to our next session for the day. So as we continue our journey through the realms of cybersecurity and emerging technologies, it is my honor to introduce our next distinguished speaker. She has been the driving force behind the Safer Cyberspace initiative with the CSA Singapore. Prior to her role in CSA, she led the charge in driving emerging technology strategies and programs such as blockchain and human-machine collaboration at IMDA. Before joining the public sector, she honed her expertise in network engineering, playing a key role in managing career-grade switches, routers, caches, and traffic management equipment. Her responsibilities extended to managing critical network services such as DNS and radius, ensuring seamless connectivity for users. In the spirit of giving back and growing, our speaker participates in mentorship programs for young professionals who have keen interest in the digital and emerging tech space. Today, our thought leader is joining us to share her insights on cybersecurity, emerging technologies, and the importance of building a safer cyberspace. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a happy round of applause as she steps on the DOA stage to ignite our imaginations and inspire us all. So, ladies and gentlemen, we present to you the Director of Cyberspace Division at CSA, the very inspiring Ms. Veronica Tan.
Okay, hi, good morning everyone. I'm very happy to be here, and being the third speaker in this morning's session, I'm very pleasantly surprised and heartened to see that cybersecurity and resiliency has been very much a theme in today's presentation. So I think it's timely for me to start the presentation to just set the stage that actually, for Singapore, we do have a vision to be a digital economy, and we want to be a trusted digital hub. And obviously, cybersecurity is very important as part of this big vision of ours. So in terms of moving towards the digital economy, how are we doing? I would say that the global pandemic actually helped us significantly because we've been all forced to go online, and basically we have seen firms accelerating their digitalization. Now, for those which are just starting out in their digitalization journey, it could be digitization, which is a conversion of their physical to digital assets, but obviously there are those that have rapidly embraced emerging technology as well. I also noticed a trend, and that is almost every speaker this morning has talked about generative AI. I am probably also one of them. So I think just as an example here, this report that I'm showing at the right of the slide shows some studies done by McKinsey on the potential economic impact of embracing generative AI. Basically, I think firms do see the impact of digitalization, and this is just one of an example. So I guess being the cybersecurity person in the room, it's probably my responsibility to put out that gentle nag to say that even as we digitalize, it means that we are more interconnected with our systems and so on, your APIs and so on, and basically this puts businesses into a new trajectory of cyber threats. A couple of statistics that I want to share here, which was taken off Verizon's Data Breach Investigations Report 2023. Basically, they have studied a large number of cybersecurity incidents, and I suppose it's not surprising to say that ransomware is still at the top of mind and has gone to be ubiquitous across all organization sizes, across all industries. I'll talk about Log4j and supply chain issues a little bit later in the subsequent presentation. But apart from the technology aspects, I wanted to draw everyone's attention to the pie chart on the right-hand side. You would see that about 70% of the breaches involve the human element. So even as we fret over our technology, our code, and our processes, let us not forget the developer, the other colleagues in the office, and basically all the employees in the organization. As people, we are all prone to making errors. Sometimes it's a case of misusing our privileges that we have access to because it's easier and more convenient. In some cases, we have so many accounts that we may have misplaced them, reused them, or gotten it lost and stolen along the way. And of course, there's always social engineering attacks to worry about, and these are getting increasingly real and sophisticated. So I think the question is, as we look into our crystal ball moving forward, what do we think are some of the emerging technology implications on cybersecurity? And the good thing is we don't have to do the hard work cracking our heads over it. ENISA, which is a cybersecurity agency overseeing the EU, has done that for us. I just wanted to basically pull out a few, just as a quick example. Number one is supply chain compromise of software dependencies. I thought this would be a key trend that is important and relevant to today's target audience. And the other is, well, surprise, surprise, artificial intelligence abuse. Just a couple of examples. So I think deepfake is not new. Research has been working on it, and I think many of you who have been following the developments of AI may remember one of the very first research papers where Obama, researchers basically did a deepfake of Obama saying things that he didn't say. So I think technology has since progressed, and such tools are now very much more commonplace. What has happened is that researchers have seen deepfake applications evolving from the initial political or social setting into the enterprise and the business setting. As one example, authorities in the US have issued a warning about deepfake phishing interviews. When the global pandemic came about, how many of you actually did your job interviews online? I'm willing to bet that many of you have gone online with your job interviews. So what has happened is that they have found a deepfakes basically going for online interviews and applying for a job in the organization. Typically, the roles that they will apply for are roles that are within the organization that have access to data. So if you think about it, securing your data and proprietary information from an insider threat is usually a lot harder compared to securing it from an external threat. So this is one of the reasons why the authorities decided to issue a warning so that companies would be aware about such an emerging trend. Earlier on, I think quite a few discussions have talked about generative AI, and ChatGPT was also mentioned. Tools like this have guardrails put in place to mitigate against abuse. But of course, there's always the evil twin, and recently, WormGPT has surfaced. So the researchers have looked into this, and basically what they have done is to try this in the context of phishing, and they realized that it has the potential to actually generate very convincing email, very targeted for the audience, and basically this will mean that business email compromise may rise because it's a lot more sophisticated, and us as humans, we may tend to fall prey to it simply because it looks and feels and sounds just like our boss or our finance division. Okay, another development that we thought was heartening is, well, basically a lot of more formal publications on the risk associated with large language models. So I thought this one will also be relevant for the developer audience. OWebs has released a top 10 for the large language model applications, and these will be some of the top security challenges that you would need to think about as you use large language models in your application. So maybe in the list here, this is a publicly available paper. In the list here, maybe I'll just briefly talk about prompt injection. So all of us, when we use ChatGPT, we will enter it with a prompt and basically get an output. And earlier this year, what researchers have discovered is that despite the guardrails put into place, they were able to issue prompts that caused the machine, the AI, to basically disregard what the developers have coded into it, and it ended up divulging internal information that it should not have divulged. So I think this is a fair warning for all of us as we incorporate such technologies in our day-to-day applications, something we definitely need to test for, watch out for, be aware, and make sure we have ways to mitigate this risk. So I think cybersecurity is a team sport, a collective responsibility, and I think suppliers, including solutions and app developers, play a very important role in cybersecurity of the supply chain. So I think these are some good practices and findings that ENISA has published. In terms of statistics, do you know that between 39 to 62% of organizations tend to be impacted by third-party cybersecurity incidents? And these third parties, these could be our business partners, it could be our technology partners, solution providers, and software developers partners. So I think essentially what ENISA has also found is that 62% of the attacks on the customers actually took advantage of the trust that they have in the supplier, and 66% of the incidents actually focus on the supplier's code. So I think if we put into perspective these numbers, it basically means that even as we develop our code and software, and if we ship them to customers, basically we're playing an important role in the cybersecurity posture, not just of ourselves, but as well as our customers. So I think in CSA, we know that there's a lot of security threats and it's very hard to achieve 100% security. So then what would be a practical advice that we give to all organizations, including the developers? And that is to actually take a risk-based approach. So if you are a developer belonging to an organization that's somewhere at the top of the triangle, chances are you're from a large organization and you would have good resources for cybersecurity, including a dedicated security team to help you to look at threats. This is important because likely you could be a valuable target or an important target that people may want to basically subject you to cyber threats. If you're a developer from a smaller organization, it's also possible that the organization may not have significant resources for cybersecurity, but this doesn't mean that you are threat-free simply because of the tools that we mentioned earlier on. Basically, attacks are getting a lot more pervasive because tools like ChatGPT basically makes it so much easier for even non-technical personnel to be able to launch attacks. So I think this is where we need to issue the warning that actually no one is safe from cybersecurity incidents. So then, how do we even get started? And I think one good way is to get started with the basics and the foundation. I need to admit that I stole and borrowed this concept shamelessly from Microsoft, who had a paper that talked about the cybersecurity bell curve. Now, all of us are familiar with the bell curve in the perspective of human resource, where usually most of your people would be somewhere in the big fat middle, and then your very good and your very bad are basically at the two ends of the spectrum. So I think essentially what we're trying to say is cybersecurity is no different. It's very hard for you to basically protect yourself from all the attacks out there. But if you focus on the big fat middle and put in place good basic cyber hygiene, it should help you to stay protected, not from everything, but many of the common attacks that are out there. So I think earlier on, the Gartner speaker talked about resilience as a monetizable differentiator. I was chuckling away to myself because I think we have a very similar thinking that actually in this day and age of rising cyber supply chain incidents, of an increasingly hostile threat landscape, actually cybersecurity becomes your competitive advantage. And this is one of the reasons why we have launched a cybersecurity certification for organizations in the form of Cyber Trust and Cyber Essentials Mark. So earlier on, I talked about the cybersecurity bell curve and how it's important to put in place good basic cyber hygiene, even if they don't sound very sexy, simply because it helps you to stay protected from the majority of common attacks that are out there. And what we have done is to take these basic cyber hygiene measures and put them into a certification mark that we call Cyber Essentials. As the name implies, it's not 100% security, but is the essentials that will help you to stay protected. And because this is a certification scheme, what we have done is to appoint certification bodies that will help to be sending third-party assessors to assess the measures that you have put in place before they issue you with a certificate. And these are just a very quick view of some of the basic cyber hygiene measures that we recommend for protection. This will include looking into your assets. Earlier on, I talked about the people and how people form about 74% of incidents. So people is at the top of mind of the assets, followed by your hardware, software, and data. In terms of secure protect, basic stuff like protection against the virus and malware, access control, and secure configuration. On the topic of secure configuration, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the trends in the US. So earlier on, Stephen talked about security by default and security by design and how this is not new. The concept has probably been around for 10 to 20 years. But I think what is heartening is recently, when the US talked about a shift in their cybersecurity strategy, one of the key shifts that they introduced was a secure by design concept, where they try to put the burden not so much on the end user organization, on the end users to implement security, but to actually shift some of these burden onto the solution providers and the product makers and the developers. So the thinking is that if you can ship a product out the door and basically it's already secure by default because the settings are already configured for security, then this will make it so much easier for all the end users out there who may not necessarily be experts in cybersecurity. So I think I just wanted to highlight this key shift in secure configuration, because as a developer developing software products, you may want to think about this and also start incorporating security by design in your solutions as well. Okay, so Cyber Essentials Mark was really the basic cyber hygiene, and we also have the Cyber Trust Mark, which is for organizations that have gone beyond basic cyber hygiene. Now, the thing is, it's actually very hard to prescribe a list of things that a company needs to put in place for cybersecurity because it all depends on your risk. Are you operating in a regulated industry? Are you maybe developing something where your customers are in a highly regulated industry? So generally, you need to do a risk assessment in order to figure out what is sufficiently good enough for you. What we have done with the Cyber Trust Mark is to come up with a guided risk assessment template. Basically helps you to figure out what your risk level is given your business environment. And then there are 5 different tiers of trust mark. Then you may decide which is the right tier that you would want to put in place in order for you to mitigate the risk and make it right for your business. For all of you who are thinking that actually cybersecurity is quite difficult to implement because especially for small organizations, you may not necessarily have resources in-house, what we have also done is to basically launch a scheme in the form of a cybersecurity health plan. Earlier on, Gartner talked about digital immunity. We're very much on the same page that it's very much like healthcare. You don't want to wait until you're sick before you try to cure the problem. It's generally too late. So prevention is really better than cure or better than recovery. So what we have done in the cybersecurity health plan is that we have onboarded cybersecurity consultants that are able to implement good basic cyber hygiene for small companies who do not have the resources to do this. They will help you to develop a cybersecurity health plan, which is basically to have a check of where your cyber hygiene health is, and then help you to close the gaps in your cyber hygiene health. So I think what we have done is to have a series of initiatives to help organizations basically raise their level of cyber resilience progressively. On the right, ideally, we would like to urge companies and developers to take on a risk-based approach to your cybersecurity. Do a cyber risk assessment, know what your risk posture is, and put in place the right levels of cybersecurity in order to address your business risk. If a guided risk assessment at this point is too difficult for the organization, consider, on the left of it, Cyber Essentials, which is really about basic cyber hygiene. If you also feel that you don't have the resources in your organization to get started, then consider putting in place a cybersecurity health plan, and we do have cybersecurity consultants onboarded to help you in this journey. And of course, at the very start of it, on the very left is, let us be aware that cybersecurity is not just a technical issue that we can outsource away, but if you're part of the business management, if you're part of the business thinking around it, then please recognize that this is really part of your business risk management. So I think in sum, I would like to end off today's presentation to basically say that cybersecurity is very much a collective responsibility. Let us not all think that this is actually the job of the cybersecurity team or the technical team or my vendor. It is everybody's job. Every employee in the organization has a role to play. Developers and software developers actually have a very important role to play too moving forward as you put security by design into your products. And I think if we can all do this together collectively, then we'll all have achieve our vision of Singapore being a digital trusted economy, and this will be also good for our business because it helps us to grow our trust, especially if we say that we are a trusted product developer from Singapore. Thank you very much.